Thanks everyone for coming. This is a pretty wide open session on free-to-play game design and strategies behind how to be successful in free-to-play. So my panel today is Nick Harper from Exient. He's CEO of Exient. I've got Martin, sorry I'm not going to try your last name.
Question, sir.
See, you can do it. Who's CEO at Cherry Pick Games, and then I've got Aaron Ludlow, who is product manager at PlayStack. So 3 industry experts on how to succeed and make really successful free-to-play games. And so, one of the kind of themes that I wanted to kick off here is that, games have always borrowed ideas from other games. It's a very common thing to happen, but free-to-play is a bit of the one step up from that, where you can be playing any free-to-play game and it will almost certainly have lots of stuff that you just obviously stolen from other games, or even just the concept of clones of games is such a big deal in free-to-play. And it's easy to see this as being a really bad thing. It's unoriginal. It's kind of bringing games down. But you can look at it from the player's perspective that this familiarity with these concepts makes it much easier for them to get into the game. And a really old example of this is that like every shooter since the 90s has used WASD controls, right? So when people jump in, they know exactly how to use the game. So there's kind of 2 sides to the story here. And I think the first thing I was going to put to my panel is, how important is familiar concepts in free-to-play? Can you make an original game? How hard is it to put an original idea into a game and be successful?
Well, I guess as I've got the microphone, I'll give the first answer. I think, for me, there's a balance that exists. As game creators, we're always we want to create something original. I think that's our dream. That's what we got into the industry for. But the business of free-to-play is about familiarity, I think. Unless you're a huge company that can afford to spend a huge amounts of money on marketing, you have to take cues from other successful games. The risk actually is, so in some of the games that we've done, where we've branched out and tried to be a little bit more original, what we've found from user feedback is that it actually often has a negative impact, because they say, well, it doesn't work how I expect it to work. So it's a strange sort of dilemma that you put yourself in. You're trying to be creative, you're trying to do something original, because that's fun for you as a developer, but it's also, you believe, fun for your consumer, but a lot of the time they really don't want it. Then, of course, you have to balance that with the fact that you've got to make money because these games you're giving out for free. But I'm sure that's a later question, so I'm going to hand it over.
Yeah, actually, fully agree with Nick. So I think that we had the same experience actually with our game. That when we decided to put some new kind of innovative things into the game, that people didn't really like it. So that's very important to have things that people really like, right? So yeah, same experience for us.
I think there's a balance. I always use my mum as an example on many of these conversations. My mum likes 2 types of games. She likes match-3 games and she likes slot games. And if I looked at her iPad currently, I would probably see about 50 match-3 games and 50 slot games. And if it didn't work, like Candy Crush, then she wouldn't be interested, because she just plays one, loses all her lives, goes to the next one. However, there is the balance is you want to try and be a bit different. If you want to try and get in front of Apple or Google and you want to look for featuring, because definitely if you're just a Me Too product, then you've got less chance of that. That can be through art style, or that could be through genre. And of course you've seen the likes of like homescapes and gardenscapes that are a bit of a mashup of genres, which is a thing at the moment. So it's familiar to players that understand those genres, but it's different as well because some of these mashups are relatively new. So yeah, do a balance.
Cool. So I guess the answer is let other people innovate and then try and steal it as quickly as possible.
But it's the same. It's the same on console. It's the same on PC.
Yeah.
If you look at platform games or puzzle games, but I think the slight difference on mobile is that you get a lot of, I hate the word mainstream, but players that don't play on console and don't play on PC, so they don't quite get some of the mechanics that you would assume players that play Battlegrounds or that play Super Mario would actually understand. Like copying or just being familiar from other games definitely helps.
Cool, that makes sense. So my next question on my list. So the process of building free-to-play games is a little bit different from normal games in that you can sort of do it a bit piecemeal, right? You can have your core loop, you can put it out to beta testers, you can start to add mechanics, get into soft launch, that kind of stuff. So, everyone, well, I assume most people build a game by you build the core game loop first and then start to add the metagame free-to-play stuff around it. So my question to the panel is, what's the first thing that you would add? Once you've got your neat little core loop mechanic working, what's the first metagame feature you get in there and start testing?
Well, actually, so at Exeunt we made, for Rovio, we made Angry Birds Transformers, and the first thing we did was the metagame. Because I was paranoid about making a game that everybody liked and we didn't make any money from, and we would basically go bust. So to talk a little bit about that game, it's an oldish game now. I think it's in its 4th year, and we still service it. Obviously, the value for us is that Rovio have an amazing channel and can get users like nobody's business. But when we made that game originally, it was supposed to be It was really taking Angry Birds Go, which our company had done prior, and turning it into so it was a driving game originally, and we didn't really know what we wanted the core game to be, but we did have an idea of what we wanted the meta game to be. So we actually made a Flash prototype. That was when people still used Flash, halcyon days, the good old days, and we did our meta in Flash and figured it all out. It took about 2-3 weeks whilst we were working out what the core was. So to go back to the question, which was, what do you do with the core? I think you have to be very dynamic and reactive to the play experience. You always go into a game thinking, this is what I want to make, and you'll start making that. And then at a certain point in that process, you will either find a spark of something very different to what you originally had as a vision, or you'll find that your original idea actually was good in your head or good on paper, but doesn't feel right. And I think at that point, it's very important to be able to pivot your team and your thinking, but be able to really explain why we were going that way, but we're now going that way. I think that's my answer. I waffled a bit, sorry.
That's okay.
So for us, when developing My Hospital, which is the biggest game for us so far, we actually, at the beginning, we knew what the core gameplay would be, and we've been quite lucky because we also knew what all the other parts of the game will be. So when we started to develop the game, we had these ideas, but we did a lot of testing as well. So for us, in A/B testing of even this kind of things like meta games, that was very important for us. And as I said, we've been quite lucky because we understood what we wanted to reach with the game, and we did quite easily. And yeah, so but it's important. It's really important to. I think for us, it was really important to test everything that we put into the game, and even the call loop that we were very sure that this is something that will work for us. We tested a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think what's important, especially on mobile, is just on paper have like a flow chart of understanding what the core loop is, and then coming out of that you have the monetization, you have the retention mechanics, and because obviously in mobile there's so many different areas that you need to satisfy from a player's point of view, but then also when it comes to acquiring users. So it's best to just, as you're designing the core loop, just to understand how you're going to retain these people, how you're going to get monetize these people as well. It's going to be through video ads, it's going to be through IPs, and just quite early on, you just incorporate that into your core loops, and then what loop are you talking about? You're talking about the short term, medium term, or long term. What's going to keep players coming for 30 days, or what's going to help get players to come back tomorrow? So it's just I find, at least on paper, if writing it down, even before you get to a prototype stage, just understand how you want that prototype to go in terms of them different areas.
So I guess the answer to my question, to kind of summarize what you guys said, is that you have to do it all together. You can't sort of separate out here's the game bit and here's all the free-to-play jazz. It's got to be a one-er, right? You've got to get it all right.
I think so. I don't think I don't think you can have a piecemeal approach to something like that.
So I mean, I guess that leads to another question, which is, quite often you'll see games launch without certain features. So in free-to-play, it's quite a common thing that you'll launch a game with, the most important stuff like a reward loop and an achievement thing, but you might have like VIP features or more mature gameplay that you're going to deploy later. How do you decide how to split that stuff up?
Well, I think first of all, from a soft launch, it's good to get something out there as quick as you can. But you also need to make sure you're at a standard where the metrics you're getting in and the KPIs are actually relevant to the type of product that you put out there. Like if you haven't put a very good product out there, then you can. That's not going to test if your game loops works. It's just going to say that you've not got a very good product. And I think it's. Best start from that approach, and then you've got things like daily rewards. Daily rewards is going to increase retention by a certain amount, especially to engage players. So that's not necessarily as important at the start. There's no point doing the daily rewards, doing these fancy clans, assuming the game needs clans to be a success. If you soft launch and the game just doesn't work and you're not getting the metrics, then all that work you did on the daily rewards is just kind of redundant because the game's just not going to work.
Yeah, I think that it's very important to have a plan what features you want to add into the game, and I think if you have a call-up and the call-up is really good, and you launch the game, you do a soft launch or a pre-soft launch or whatever it will be, not having already ideas for VIP features or other features, that's bad, because I think you don't have enough time to actually to create the features during the soft launch. So for us, it always works that we have the core loop and we understand the core loop, and then we also have plans for features that we want to add, and we do it step by step. So for us, social features are very important, daily rewards as well, and as Sharon said, there are some features that you understand those features will deliver a little bit better retention, so you can be sure that this will help, and this for us, for example, that's the features that we add first. So when everything is set, then the features that we understand we add first, and then we try to figure out what can be interesting for players as well. And then obviously you need to listen to players and see what they really expect from the game. And in some cases, as you said in the first question, I think that there is no really innovation when it comes to mobile games. It's copying, I don't know, but you copy a lot of stuff, but you need to listen to the players, because you can copy, I don't know, Angry Birds with different birds, and it doesn't work, right? So I think it's very important to have a plan, what you want to add, then add the features that you really understand, and then maybe if everything works well, add some new innovative features if you have ideas.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we want to do when we make a game is fundamentally you want to make something that is a fun experience for people to play. That's what your soft launch should be testing. Is it fun? If it's fun, you should be retaining your players, generally. Once you know that, all the other stuff you can actually start to bolt on later. There are obvious things, daily rewards and so on, that you will help. So you don't need to worry about that. I think you've got to be very, very disciplined. What generally seems to happen is teams are quite reluctant to release something before they feel it's absolutely perfectly polished. And actually what could happen then is that could really damage your business, because you spend extra X number of months fiddling around with something, and then you get it out and it turns out nobody liked it. So that's a disastrous strategy. So you're much better to go, okay, let's make sure that people enjoy that we've created. And as long as that's the case, then we can add the extra bits as we go along. What you have to remember, of course, is that as soon as you go into soft launch, your work productivity will drop if you have the same team size, because suddenly everyone's finding bugs and the players are coming back and saying this didn't work and that didn't work, and suddenly from going into a nice little enclosed environment of just you and a few testers, you've got, ideally, several thousand people playing the game, which is great. But also it means that there's all the issues that you didn't find in before in production will then come about. So then your productivity drops because you're going, oh crap, I've got to fix this now and that thing, and that network's not working over there, and someone in Brazil can't play it, or whatever is going on.
So I mean that's interesting, right? Because I mean I think so. Martin was sort of saying like you need to have a plan, and you're saying you're not going to be able to complete your plan because you're going to be too busy. How do you balance those two things? You know, I think it's probably true that if you don't have a plan, you're going to get yourself caught out. But also, once you're live, you know, all plans go out the window. So, is there, you know, do you kind of force yourself to, you know, if you say you're going to launch this feature in version 1.1, if 1.1 comes out next month or 3 months' time, that's definitely going to happen, or do you try to wing it?
So we have a roadmap for all our games that are live, which I usually manage. So we try and do a release every month, so an update every month, and we have a pretty clear roadmap of what that. I say pretty clear. I'm a game designer at heart, so I am the worst feature creeping person in the world. So we might have a plan to do A, B, C, and then I'll come along and go, oh, I was playing the game last night, and this thing really annoyed me. I think we should definitely do that. And the team have kind of learned to manage me more than anything, unfortunately for them. But yeah, I think you do need to have a clear roadmap of what you want to do. Ideally for probably 6+ months. Then what you have to do is, are you able to deliver on that? Because things happen, fires happen, you have to put those fires out. Usually you probably won't get everything done on your plan that you want to do, at least from my experience. So you've got to be very disciplined about making sure the team focus on the top thing of you. Let's say you've got 5 things that you want to do for the next update. Get the team to focus on the top thing, which is usually quite rare. Programmers tend to focus on the thing that they enjoy doing rather than the thing that is important. Artists, same. All of us, we go, oh, that's really awful, I don't want to do that. But that thing on number 4 on the list, that looks great, I'm totally going to do that. So you need strong discipline amongst the entire team, and not in the sense of a sort of strong-arm producer. You need a buy-in of the team as to why are we doing this and what do we believe we're going to get. And then when you miss some of the elements, then you have to make the decision, are these ones we missed more important than what next month's plan is? And then you'd reorder your prioritization every month.
Sorry. Can I go? Yeah. And one of the things that we do with our games is it depends on the size of the team, but we tend to have 2 teams within that. When I say 2 teams, it could mean there's just one person in one team or one person in the other team if it's a really short, small dev side. But you've got the strand that obviously you had the live game, because inside the live game you've also got data updates, which are there obviously to do A/B testing and to try and push our daily KPIs up as much as possible. And the way we build our games, or when a developer comes to us, we try and install in the devs to make sure as much as possible is can be updated using data. It brings its own problems, that of course, which we might go into later. But it can be a bit more of a headache, because you now have a team that's just directly working on the app updates, and you have a team that's working on live data updates as well. It brings its own problems, but it also you can reap the reward by having good data updating structure, especially to be able to change things on a daily basis without having to pump out new app updates.
Yeah, we try to update our game on a monthly basis as well, and in most cases kind of successful with this. But we also have a plan that is for more than six months, so that is a kind of like a roadmap, a list of features that we want to add, or maybe bugs that we know we need to fix. And the same goes for us. So our team picks always the best ones to do, but we try to do the biggest issues first. But it can change, because, you know, as you said, game is live, so you get live data, and you need to analyze your data, and based on the data you may change your decision to maybe to do the update that is planned for next month now, because it's needed. So yeah, for us data is key, so that, you know, we also try to set up or, you know, plan the roadmap based on the data that we collect.
Okay, so that's an interesting point, in that you're saying, you know, you've got a kind of relatively set plan of what you're going to develop, but then you're looking at the data, trying to understand what people are doing and what they want. how do you balance that? Because I mean, sometimes you're going to look at the data and it's going to tell you, we don't need this amazing feature over here. We need this other thing which is totally missing. So how I mean, I guess the question is, how much can data influence the actual roadmap rather than just basically giving you bugs to squash?
I think it can big time. So yeah, I think for live games and free-to-play games, you need data, and based on the data, you need to make your decisions. And I think all of us are gamers, and most probably gamers, and love to do game design. But in some cases, you really need to look at the numbers, and it might be that there is a cool feature, a cool social feature. Maybe there's a very cool new sexy thing coming from Apple or Google, and you want to implement, but it will not have any effect on your monetization or retention. Then it doesn't make sense to make it now. So at least for us, so we really first we look at numbers, and when it makes sense for us, then we do it. If not, then we skip and try to do it later if possible.
Yeah, I just want to add that data actually tells you nothing. What the product managers and the analysts, they extract from the data what the game actually needs, and what the game roadmap should be. Data and analytics, I get heavily involved with because I think it's fascinating. And it's all good to track absolutely everything in your game, but being able to actually look at that data and make business decisions based off that data, it can be interpreted in so many different ways. You need to make sure you've got the analysts and the product managers that are there are able to identify what's coming out of that data, because so many times I see, especially when we get smaller independent teams, they're like, oh yeah, we've got everything in the analytics, and I'm like, okay, well, why are you tracking this or why are you tracking that? Like, I don't know, I just got told to track everything. So data is critically important in mobile, but being able to actually encode that and understand what it's telling you is the most important thing.
So I'm being told.
Just to add on that, sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Just to add on that, I fully agree. As I said, data is key for us, but you need to understand your data, and often having too much data it can be a problem. So for us, for example, we track only a few things, and based on our analytics, that we find out that this kind of things are very important for us. And but yeah, you can collect millions of different things, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we look at three things really. What does the data say? What do the consumers say? And what do we think? And if all three of those align, that usually determines that's the thing that we want to try. I'll be honest. There's many things that we've tried that we thought were guaranteed to improve our KPIs and have had a complete disastrous impact. That is usually when you go into your panic mode that you talked about, where your roadmap kind of gets thrown away and you go, crap, why did that happen? We thought this was going to happen and now we have to change it, and then you have to rapidly fix things. I think it's the nature of it's what makes the industry exciting, I think, but it's also can be quite terrifying. But those three things I think are really important to look at. What do you believe as developers is a good element to have? What is the data? Is the data proving or disproving your hypothesis? And then the consumer's asking for what you want to give with your forums and so on.
So I guess there's an interesting balance there. I mean, in an ideal world, you have a flow where you have stuff on your roadmap, or you have stuff the data's telling you, and you design a feature that you hope is going to improve your KPIs, but then you would slowly roll it out via A/B testing and in a particular region and that kind of stuff. How much of what you do is that kind of very thorough, let's test things and optimize them first and then release them, and how much is let's just get it out there?
So there's a balance between the ideal and the reality. The ideal is that you should really A/B test everything, because there's nothing worse from experience of doing a feature or an update that you believe is going to have a positive impact on your KPIs, and it has a negative impact, and you don't understand what went wrong, and then you kind of can't roll it back as easily. So I think really it's important to try and A/B test as much as you can. the hard part about A/B testing, at least certainly for us, these guys might have a different perspective, is it's a slow process because you can't like any scientist, you can't. I'm going to test 3 things at once. Well, which is the one? Oh, that's changed. But which of the 3 things that I tested is the thing that had the impact? So unless you can really distinctively separate the things that you're testing, there's always going to be this sort of blurry crossover, which means that it can slow the process down a lot. And when you're an impatient person like me, that's where the let's go for it sort of mentality can come and bite you on the bum a little bit.
Yeah, so A/B testing is interesting because I think it's becoming ever more important, and especially as we get even more tech that enables us to do so. I think you've got to be careful in a couple of areas. Obviously, when it comes to changing IAPs of changing perhaps in-app purchases and costs on items, if you have a very large game, then you're at risk of community feedback. About why is this price X and why is this price Y, and it can be A/B testing generally can be, as Nick says, can be very slow because you need to get the right amount of users to actually have enough to be able to decide on which route is to go. But I think it's a combination between instinct and gut feel, and basing it on previous games you've worked on. And separately, which ones that you actually have to A/B test.
Yeah, I also think for us it's very important to test only one thing at the time. Just as you said, it can be dangerous to test too many things because you may not know what really what was the which feature really popped up your attention or whatever it will be. So we always try to test only one thing. It might be different things. It might be a gameplay feature or a new I don't know, ad implementation or whatever. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I think connected to A/B testing is also this concept that's bubbling up now about like live ops for games, right? So as well as you can dynamically change your game a bit with A/B testing, but there's also this idea that you're constantly having sort of seasonal or weekend offers or promos and things like that. In the same vein, how do you make sure those are balanced and don't impact your community negatively?
So for us, first, what is much more important is in terms of live operations, global event that we run on a weekly basis. That's number one for us. Number two, that will be special offers. Sometimes we obviously connect both, but we found out that for us it's more important to have global events that people can communicate with others in the game, and that's what we see drives numbers for us. And then number two will be actually some sales offers that we run as well, and that we don't really have a plan that we need to run a sales offer every week or every 2 weeks or a month. It really also depends sometimes on the data that we see when it makes sense for us to run an offer. Not sure if this answers the question.
No.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's the same as Martin was saying. There's having a predictability about your live ops and the service that you offer to the players is really valuable. So on the Transformers game, we have a weekly tournament. It starts every Thursday, ends Wednesday. Because we do the Dancing with the Stars Strictly game, obviously we follow the format of the TV show. So at the weekend, it's the live show. So a lot of players come in just to do the live show. So there's a predictability that exists in the game, which I think adds huge value for the players. Not everybody in your audience has the amount of spare time that you would like them to have. Having said that, there's also a level of unpredictability that you need to keep. So, for example, when we do offers, we don't make them predictable because we don't want everyone to know, oh, every Friday it's offer day. I won't bother spending Monday to Thursday. I'll just wait till Friday, right? Because then that's bad for our business. So that side of the live ops is quite erratic. Usually, I know there are some companies, not us, probably because we're just not sophisticated enough yet, but some companies definitely have a sort of, they can switch on a sale immediately, as if they look at the data and they go, okay, we were supposed to have made, I don't know, 50 grand today and we've only made 40, stick an offer out, let's get an extra 10 grand in, lads. Things like that can happen, but that, I think it's right to have an unpredictability at that aspect, but in terms of the pure game experience, having that predictability I think is quite important for the audience experience.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both the guys really. I think I think Nick's right about you don't want a culture in your games that people do wait for the offers. But I do think occasionally to have some predictability is not necessarily a bad thing. I think Clash Royale is probably a great one to look at, because obviously you have the in the card shop you have the cards which rotate on every X amount of hours, and then at the weekends they have double the amount of cards you can get. So there's an increased chance that the one you want is going to be there. So I think that's pretty cool. If you have a place where perhaps you have these timed offers that they just appear and they're going to rotate every 12 hours or 24 hours, because then that keeps players to come back to see if there is an offer that suits them. And it's quite good then if you keep them within the same time period. It's obviously not quite an A/B test because you're not doing it at the same time, but you can build up a catalogue of which offers were most popular.
So I think in the same kind of vein, I mean, what you're kind of saying is that a game should be predictable and should be, not catch people off guard, except for, of course, in the case of offers where you kind of want them to feel that it's a special thing and not a kind of permanent fixture. But do you think there's any place, or do any of you do any sort of micro-targeting or personalization of the game aimed at a particular group of players? And does that cause any issues with, say, customer support?
Yeah, we do a lot of segmentations and this kind of things, and we do this not only for sales offers, but also for some events that we run in the game. And yeah, not sure if this causes any problems, but it might be that you get simply more emails from players because they complain of something, and maybe they have a friend in the States and they got a super offer, and he's in UK. He's not so it might be, but this is what it is. It's a free-to-play game, so it changes every day, at least for us. So yeah, you need. I think, as I said a couple of times, you need to plan this, and you need to have a roadmap for this kind of things.
I think what's really important is you want to segment your audience, but in a way. Well, there's two ways of looking at it. The sort of business cutthroat side is you segment your audience in the way that gets you the most money. But I think a nicer thing to do is to segment your audience in a way that gives all of your players the best experience they can have. So, for instance, imagine your game has a weekly competition. You can look at your data and you can determine that, let's say, for example, some players only play once a day. That's it. For whatever reason, it might be just they don't have the time or the inclination, whatever it is. Whereas other players could be real super fans and they're playing 4 or 5 times a day. If you put those two groups in the same tournament bucket, obviously the single player day group are going to struggle to get anywhere compared to the super fans. So in that sense, segmenting them out into, well, we'll put the more casual players here and the more super fans here, creates actually, I believe, the best experience for both groups, because you've got the people who can only afford a little bit of time are getting a great experience because they're with a similar cohort to them, whereas the super fans are playing because they really enjoy that level of competition. I think that it's weird because when you think about it, you think, well, that's really not a good way of treating our players, but actually I think it creates the best experience for them, in my opinion. I don't know if these guys agree or disagree with that.
Well, on the same subject of offers, one of the features we've been on one of our other games is designing an offer system that's personalised to the player. So we track, for instance, power-ups that are used, gadgets that are purchased, etc. And if we know that a player likes a particular playstyle or likes a particular item, then we will include that in an offer, or a bundle deal, because we think that they're most likely to convert into being a payer. And so we just have like a general IEP, and dependent on what the content is, also depends on the price as well. So you'll have someone that's a super fan, that's really engaged, may have spent over $100 in your game. So you know that we could probably give them a $9.99 offer, and there's a fairly decent chance that they may take it up if it includes stuff that they use. Whereas you might have someone that hasn't converted yet, and you might have a smaller offer and a cheaper offer. But I think it's important to see if you can personalise these offers, then it's great because you don't want to show something in the shop that you've got no chance of converting a player to.
Makes sense. And I mean, I guess the meaty question is, does the data support that this strategy of personalization works? Or I mean, I'm not going to ask you to quote numbers, but in your experience, have you seen, we talked about uplifting KPIs before. By doing these kind of things, do you see a big uplift in your revenue?
Well, we definitely, yeah. We by giving these personalised offers, we've definitely seen an uplift, but also an uplift in like player love as well, because if they're getting something, if they're getting something that they like for cheaper, then they're going to play longer. There's a good chance to give you a good review, and it keeps them within the ecosystem.
Cool. So I think I've got time for one more question for the panel, and I'll open it up to the audience. So similar kind of vein, I think one of the biggest challenges I see for games is that you say you have a very successful game and you're 6 months in and you're doing really great, but you've now got quite a tricky problem that you've got all these older players that are really experienced and really, really, they know the ins and outs of the game, to minute detail, but you're still bringing in new players because you have to keep bringing in new players. So how do you, at that point in a game's life cycle, how do you balance the needs of your mature base with the guys that are coming in for the first time?
That's a tough one. We don't do it.
Come on, I gave you the questions ahead, Simon.
It's interesting because it's kind of in a similar vein. Again, Clash Royale is a great example of a game that I stepped away for a good 6 months. Loaded the game up again, tried to get into it, and I was like, it was so difficult to get into because there's new cards, there's new balancing, and your game you need to continue evolving your game. But you need to, something that I think a lot of games don't do very well is when they do re-engagement campaigns to try and get people back into the game, is they don't easily let that player know what's changed. It's like if you're watching a series on Netflix or something, and it's like previously on. You almost want something like that, but then depending on when they're re-entering, you could actually somehow see what they've missed. Like again, a similar vein, we're trying something similar, whereas we'll display a HTML5 pop-up. And we'll try to establish when we re-engage the player when they last played to see the kind of big features or the big changes in the game that they missed, so we can try and educate them. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it's perfect.
I think
You got an answer?
I've got an answer. I don't know if it's a good one, but anyway. I mean, I'm a huge believer in exposition in games, from the first-time user experience through to re-engagement. I think it's one of those things that we kind of talk about quite casually. Oh, I just need to sort my exposition, which is phenomenally difficult to get right. Whilst they're not really a mobile developer, but Nintendo are the masters of exposition. So play their games to understand it. I think that is a huge element of re-engagement that we have to get right. The challenge, of course, is that without really having a solid data structure for all of your players, if someone goes away and comes back, it's very hard for you to know exactly when they left and why they've come back, to therefore do that level of exposition. And from a technical perspective, it's phenomenally difficult to make sure that you serve those returning players or the new players versus the existing players the right elements so that they can get back into the game. So this is kind of a sort of I'm kind of avoiding the question a bit with my answer, but because it's like the silver bullet, really. I think if you get it right, that's when you're onto a mega hit. But you can't underestimate the amount of effort required to do it. It's a phenomenal amount of work.
No, I mean, that's
think,
why
to really nail it.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because even I think the best games out there, if you look at the ones that have lasted for years, that's still their biggest challenge, is how do you solve this new versus old play. All right, one final thing, one word answer, since we didn't answer the question on the panel. What is the one feature that modern free-to-play games cannot exceed without?
I think they have to be fun. Otherwise, no one will play them.
I agree. And I also agree with your previous answer. Good one. Yeah, fun. And what else? For us, at least, that's events that we run in the game.
Okay, live events.
Monetization. You can have the most fun game in the world. If it's not making any money, then there's something. It's a bit of a boring answer, I'm afraid. But if it's not making any money, then great. Yeah.
Cool.
It's a hobby.
Yeah.
Well, I'll thank my panelists again for a really lively discussion. And